welcome to a brand new episode of the Nitro RX podcast. I am one of your hosts, as always, Thiemo and Nabila, and I am joined, as always, by my brilliant co-host, Nabila. How are you?
I am doing well. How about yourself?
I'm not too bad, thank you. And we're fresh off a race weekend, an actual race weekend. It's been about 67 years, but we finally got back to it. And first blood in America, Minnesota no less, and it did not disappoint.
No, it didn't. I think it was a pretty solid weekend and nice to see what happened, I think. I mean, was it inevitable to see Travis back on top, though, on home turf?
He definitely had a point he wanted to prove there, so that even if he didn't win at any of the other American rounds that are coming, he wanted to do it here, I think, because afterwards, again, it's not that he's not going to put the effort in to win, but I think he really wanted it here. And he had his State of the Union address, which was hilarious. If you didn't see that, go and watch that. And it just seemed like he just fed off the energy of the crowd, and from doing that and getting in the car, we had more track time than all the other drivers because he had the two categories, but at the same time, it's Nitro RX. You can't predict anything that's going to happen there. Really, it could have all gone terribly wrong for him, but I don't think there was any beating him this time.
No, that's true. I think what's interesting is you kind of see how it's not always him that was a shoe-in. Like in previous years, you were like, oh, it makes sense. He's built all the tracks, but he didn't do great in Lynn Hill and he didn't do great in Sweden. So I guess it was one of those things. He had a point to prove. He's like, well, this is my championship. I have to win. But like, also, I think that track was cool. Minnesota, there was a lot of almost hits, which was kind of interesting compared to the rest.
I think that the second turn, the hairpin was very reminiscent of Lynn Hill, but in reverse, just dirtier. And I was like, wait a minute, I've seen you before. What are we doing here? But it was a really nice again, mixed conditions over both days. So it kind of kept things very spicy, which you can't really ask for much more than that, can you?
No, not really. I think you just have an all around exciting weekend, and it was nice to see the American crowd turn out for it.
Yeah, I mean, they love it. And I think it's only, we've said in previous episodes for previous race weekends that it seems to be building and building. And this definitely seemed like the next step of the escalation. So the next one in LA, yeah, there's going to be a lot of people there, I reckon.
I think so. I think now we're back on US turf and there's that buzz around it again now. Like you went global, you came back, and it's really exciting to see how much of a buzz there is around Nitro, and people are just enjoying it. You can see the drivers having a great time, and I think that makes a huge difference, like when they're genuinely enjoying themselves and the environment and what they're doing.
It's the competitive nature of the drivers on the one hand, because there is a championship, but at the same time, not that they're not bothered about it, but they're just enjoying themselves, having such a casual looking time of it as well, that it's like, oh yeah, and if I happen to win a race or happen to win a championship, then yeah, that's great as well. I mean, case in point is our main and only news bulletin of the weekend, which is Chris Meek is out, Jenson button in. And okay, fairly inexperienced for this kind of racing, F1 World Champion, but doesn't translate over too well to this. But he just seemed in such a good mood all weekend, did not seem to be too downtrodden that he was kind of not trundling around at the back, because that sounds really mean, but he was learning and going in, but he's just really enjoying himself and just did not seem to mind at all. Whereas, if they had been back in the McLaren in F1, he would have been going berserk over that.
Oh, absolutely. I think what's really cool is Excite has two people that are very much new to the whole system. Like Chris Meek, it wasn't his forte. He was more rally. Okay, he has more of experience on that kind of in the conditions and stuff like that. But Jenson, coming from track, luckily he has experience of people around him, so that probably didn't faze him. But it's a completely different beast, and it's a lot less time, and obviously so much shorter with everything going on. But yeah, it was nice to see him kind of making strides, and I think as the US rounds progress, he has time to kind of bed himself in, which will be good.
Definitely. And I mean, it was very impressive seeing how quick he was adapting as well, because on specific corners as well, you could see from the beginning of the weekend towards the last bit where he was competing the weekend, spoilers, he didn't make it to the final, sadly, but he would approach certain corners in a very traditional Formula One kind of style way, and then he would realize, oh yeah, no, that's not how this works, I need to change that. And you'd slowly see that evolution, and it wasn't perfect by the end of it, but it was moving in the right direction, and it was great to see that. And he almost beat kind of boss and teammate Ollie Bennett to the final in the last chance qualifier. So it was very close at the end, actually, kind of going over the finish line. So maybe Bennett's going to be worried about that for the next couple of rounds. If everything goes smoothly as much as it can for Nitro, then maybe he's created a monster.
Absolutely. I think it'll be really exciting to see how the season progresses. But what's really nice about the whole championship is there's some really solid drivers. I mean, you have like Andreas, Bakkerud and Fraser McConnell. They had a massive crash. Obviously, both were fine, which is great. And still, they made it into the final with one finishing P3. I mean, Fraser McConnell's having a great season in both categories, I feel. And Andreas Bakkerud finishing P4. And that comes off of an accident. That just shows like how quickly you're able to repair these cars. And I feel like it's a lot easier to come back from something than in F1. Like when you have an accident, it's really hard to come back from. But in Nitro, they're like, no, we can fix this up. Duct tape, duct tape survives.
They did have a couple of backups for those cars. They did kind of nick those bits, but yeah, mostly. But again, you see that crash at the start as well, and you think, Christ, what happened? They must have had a massive come together, and then you watch it back, and they just both did it by themselves without any help whatsoever, and you think, Christ. But again, it just shows the safety aspect that, I mean, 10, 20 years ago, that would have been a lot of different story, I reckon. And it just shows that they're incredibly quick, but they're incredibly safe. If you can, and again, some of the other crashes we saw over the weekend, you can have some mega shunts and be absolutely fine.
Absolutely. I think safety is so key in these, and each team has done so well in keeping up with that. I know they're not under FIA, but I feel like they've taken on this. The FIA is like very much focused on safety in these aspects. And it's great to see. And it's really nice when you have an accident and then you still end up back on top. I feel like Fraser and that, they must have been really happy with it, because usually sometimes it sets you off on the wrong foot going into a final. Like, oh, I had that accident. It kind of plays in your mind sometimes for some drivers. But it was really cool to see that they kind of just left it in the past, forgot about it, and did what they needed to do.
It's like horse riding. You just got to get straight back on there, and you just can't be allowed to think about it for too long, and you just got to just ride it out, essentially.
Absolutely. I think another highlight of the weekend was the finish, really. Nice to see Pastrana, as I said, back on a win in home turf. And nice to see Larsson back on the podium. He's done really well, like this season, especially after what he went through at the beginning of the year. To see him still competing so solidly, it's really nice to see. And yeah, McConnell, definitely very exciting to see where he ended up, because we had a chat with him earlier and he said it was kind of difficult switching between the two cars, but he seems to be taking it in his stride and doing really well. I mean, that's a P3 in Group E, a couple of wins, I think, or at least one win in Supercar. And I'm pretty sure he ended up on the podium in Supercar again this weekend. So, I mean, he's just owning it, really, isn't he? And I'm excited to see how he finishes out this rest of the year, because even though it feels like the series has been going on for such a long time, we're only on round 3 and I'm still got a fair few rounds to go. So anything can really happen, but we've definitely had like a ton of different winners, which is exciting for a championship.
I think that whole aspect of it is the fact that, well, the championship standings, which we'll get to later, tell a different story. Whenever you come into these race weekends, you still think, well, this could be anyone's game. Just because X driver's done well doesn't mean that there's a guarantee for it this time. And again, just because they have a massive shunt at the beginning of the weekend doesn't mean you can count them out either. And just because you're an XF1 champion coming into this for the first time doesn't mean that in a round or two's time, you're not going to be a massive threat. It's ridiculously unpredictable, but brilliant at the same time, because they've all got their strengths and weaknesses, but they all seem to balance out, which is weird, but also excellent and exactly what we want.
Exactly. I think this is the first year where you can see like massive fights and it's all completely different. Like Larsson came out ahead in the very beginning. You had a different winner in Sweden again, and now you've got a different winner in Pastrana in Minnesota. Do you know what I mean? And all the tracks seem to be providing that little bit of a different element that suits some drivers more than others. And as we progress through all of these rounds, it'll be really interesting to see. What would be awesome is if there's a championship that ends up with a different winner on every single race. Now that would be exciting.
You jinxed it now.
No, I didn't jinx it. It can happen. It will happen. I'm hoping. But what was also great was to see Bennett in a final for the first time. He had a pretty solid weekend, and I think he should be really proud of how he's progressed. And then finished up by Carlson, Martel, and Oliver Ericsson.
Yeah, I mean, 8-car final was absolute chaos off the start, but again, it's what you want to see, and it was really nice. And again, glad we had at least one Ericsson brother in there. We were kind of hoping the two brothers would fight each other a little bit over the weekend. Didn't quite get that as we wanted it to, but we'll take what we can get. And again, top 5, interestingly as well, all different nationalities, which just for that extra, it's a useless stat, but it's again, it adds that extra bit of spice to it.
Absolutely. And there was another exciting ending to the NRX Championship this weekend with Tommy Hillman coming out on top in Minnesota. I know we had a chat with him and he was like, I really don't know if we're going to be heading over to the US, but it was really exciting to see that category get the chance to do a round out here. And I mean, he clinched it with double win this past weekend.
Yeah,
so what
4
a
wins
solid
in a row.
year for him.
And then the most amusing part of that for me becomes European champion in Minnesota. And It's the first time he's ever been out of Europe. So he was just, I think, in one of the pieces of coverage too, we're talking to him and he's saying that, this is all very odd and I'm a little bit nervous, but also this track is really cool. And then he just suddenly switched to like totally into drive mode there. And you could see that he was celebrating on top of the car both times when he won on both days and just absolutely loving it. And I think, he's going to be back next year and he's going to be wanting to maybe try his hand in a few other categories maybe as well, because it's like, well, I've won this now. Right, what's the next thing?
Absolutely. And I think, what a solid year for him. Like, he couldn't be more proud of that. I think there was points in time where he was like, I don't know whether I'm going to get my car to this next round. That was Sweden back in, God, what was that like?
July.
Yeah. So really nice to see that he made it out, got his chance in the US, which he really wanted, and won it all. So that was awesome. I did enjoy that. And he will definitely be one of the drivers that impressed me this weekend.
No, I think as well, it's interesting because Finland obviously got cancelled because we could have seen him be champion there, but because he was saying that it was going to be tricky to get to the US and because of money and sponsors and all the rest of it, it'd be interesting to see how much this extended time between rounds actually helped him on that one in terms of getting it, because if they'd had to go to Finland, but maybe didn't have everything sorted, maybe we're in a different headspace, maybe it wouldn't have happened. So maybe it was a weird blessing in disguise, but it's just very odd and very fascinating to see how all that impacts it and can tell this kind of a story and plays a very crucial part in it.
Yeah, I do wonder if some of the drivers were, in a way, obviously no one's ever happy when a round gets cancelled, but in a way, a part of them might have been happy that Finland was cancelled because it brings them to the home of Nitro itself. Like, they got that chance to compete in the first round in Minnesota stateside, and that's like literally the birthplace, US, obviously the birthplace of Nitro. So maybe in a way, they're kind of inadvertently happy about that. And with the cancellation, that would have meant any sponsorship and money that was going to that round could have just been reallocated to this round. Obviously, it must have had a much higher expense because they had to get the cars out here. But I was very happy with how that ended up, and great to see Tommy winning it.
And again, because it was shown in the US on Peacock, I think you've got this kid who's coming over to America for the first time, wins this championship, but it's on a major network. And you're just exposed to all of America there. And okay, not everyone's American watching, but a lot of people will see that. And he'll obviously be one of the trending people from the weekend because of this. Opens up a whole new market to him. So if he wants to do something in America exclusively there, that probably is going to be a lot more straightforward for him now. Or one would hope that anyway. So again, maybe it's all worked out for the best on that one.
Hopefully. But no, exciting to see what happens. And sad to see that kind of like end now, because obviously it's closed up and done. I don't know. I wonder if it will feel like there's something missing on the next round of Nitro, or if it will all just kind of fall back into place.
Oh, it's funny you mention that, because the little dune buggy things, whose name I can't remember, Crosscuts, that's the one. I've been trying to think of that all day. They weren't there this weekend, but we had the Can-Am side-by-sides instead. So I wonder if there's maybe going to be something that comes in to replace that, replaces the NRX, for the next round and go on from there and see, because we have the Can-Ams here, which that was a lot of fun because it's just basically bigger versions of the cross cars, which you just need to watch it. It was just so good. And you had a couple of new faces in there, one of which was Letitia Buffoni, and I honestly had no idea who the heck she was coming into the weekend, because again, you got so many drivers coming in out for one round or another, and I've got a certain background. I only know certain people, and okay, I was like, right, I got to figure this out. Who is she? Comes from the skateboarding world, apparently, and there's a lot of impressive stuff there. I have not done said research, but apparently it transfers quite nicely over into Can-Am. She made a quite decent debut and was just kind of settled in, wasn't trundling around the back, got stuck in straight away and had a lot of fun and got a lot of good support from the crowd, who I'm guessing a lot of them know her because you've got a kind of younger audience there. So you see a lot of that. And obviously Nitro Circus, there's a lot of skateboarding in there as well. So it's great to see those transitions between what you can be doing to prepare for this and maybe just have a go at this. But she seems just very determined to do that. So I hope we get to see more of her, because it'd be a shame when we see people like, as much fun as it is to see Johan for one off, you kind of want to see some newer talent coming through, because you, as much as World Runnercross, you would maybe enjoy that. You don't want to see Timmy, Kevin, and Johan all the time winning. You want to see the next people coming on and trying at least to get their foot in the door. So she's definitely one that caught everyone's eye, I think, this weekend.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. We definitely probably will start seeing different types of categories come out to these rounds. And maybe this Can-Am one's here to stay. So yeah, it'll be exciting to see her again and a few of the other drivers. But I just think using the Can-Am is a good idea. Like, people love the cross karts. Like, why not try and make it so that there's more kind of categories like that? It's the most entertaining.
I was saying, if you're being fluid as well with the RX being done now, and you've still got the other categories, but again, if you want to have 3 or 4, it keeps that extra spice there, I suppose. And I'm not being sponsored by Spice this episode as much as I might be saying it, but there's always something new and different there to keep things interesting, and you're not just there for the Group E. Like, that's the constant, but it's not just why you're coming in. I think that's really clever for how they keep attracting new people, because you can never say, oh, I know what's going to happen this weekend, it's going to be X, Y, Z. Like, actually, I have no idea what this bit is. Let's go and find out.
Exactly. And I think Nitro has that way of kind of bringing in a ton of different people and different drivers and just excitement each weekend. Like, oh, we don't have this weekend, but we're going to replace it with this, or NRX is over, but who knows what's going to happen next. And I think there's that something new every single round that isn't like, that's bringing in a completely different aura and excitement to the whole thing. And if they can continue to do that every round, that's something to be said, that they have that opportunity and that kind of ability to bring through so many different things. I don't know, like, are we going to end up with 6 different things by the end of it? Who knows? Or are we just going to swap in and out the whole way through?
To be honest, I'm smirking because I've just thought, when they go to the snowy and icier places on the calendar, I don't know if you've watched the latest episode of the Grand Tour, but they did a whole thing where they've got cars going around the ice and they have a skier holding on at the back and they're just pulling them around all the time. I think, yeah, I would believe Nitro doing that. You never know, we might see something like this going over some jumps.
I think, yeah, that would be far-fetched, but I wouldn't put it past them.
Street Bike Tommy might have a go at that if no one else does. But also in the Can-Am making his debut, Ben Maier, which, if you're not familiar, he's 13 years old and makes us all look redonkulously old. And not only did he finish second in the final for the Can-Am on his debut event, he also had a bet for qualifying with Travis that Travis said, if you beat me in qualifying, I'll give you $1,000. And if I win, I want a signed dollar from you. So Travis lost $1,000 on Saturday. And this 13-year-old just whooped his ass, basically. And even though Travis absolutely dominated in the final, it wasn't the biggest gap in the world. And I don't know if anyone should be concerned about that or not, but it's just mightily impressive. And he had a little interview with Coley and Jared in between races, quite sure of himself for a 13-year-old and just happy to go along with it. It's just insane, because you would not see that in an FIA accredited championship, but Nitro just do not give a flying hoot about it. And it again showed that he's mature enough to go driving there and was beating people so much more older and experienced than him. And it was just ridiculous. We had the oldest driver back in Sweden. We've got probably the youngest driver this time around. I don't know what they do next, but I'm loving whatever it is they're doing.
Yeah. I think that's what's really cool. There is just so many different things happening, and that Can-Am championship. Is it a championship or is it just kind of like a one-off? I'm not really sure how they've slotted that in. But
I'll let you know next time.
Right? But how awesome to have a 13-year-old just coming in. And that's the most exciting thing about Nitro, is they can do whatever they want. They can bring in completely new talent. They can bring in younger people. It's all private. It's all closed. And it's super interesting to see how, and it's nice to see, these young kids coming in and getting those opportunities early on, because it doesn't always happen, especially in FIA rounds. You can't have a 13-year-old come to an F1 track. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just not going to happen. So I'm really intrigued to see how all that goes on.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous because you just think as well, the closest you have to that in recent times is probably Max Verstappen in F1, but even then, 17, still 5 years older than this kid is. And you just think, oh, there's something we'd like to have seen if they'd been around at the same time. That would have been quite amusing to do a compare and contrast, but not this time, unfortunately. But I think as well, the atmosphere at this Nitro event in particular, I don't know if it's just because it's first time back on American soil after so long or what, but the whole dynamic from the main three doing the coverage, from Cody, from Street by Tommy, Jared, they did a great job all weekend, and it was really nice. I mean, I was skipping through parts of it just because of time. I want to go back and have a look at it, but one thing that stood out to me was Street by Tommy out of nowhere just suddenly has a barbecue off the back of his truck and is just giving food out to people. And as I was just like, I'm going to watch that later because I imagine that's amusing to people. Go straight back to Jared. First thing I heard was salmonella. I was like, yeah, I could believe that. I can believe there's probably an issue there, but it's just the banter that they have there is so nice. And coming off a couple of weeks ago, watching the World Rallycross round in Portugal, the coverage was fine. But again, I can see why perhaps people are turning away from that and coming over to Nitro RX or looking at other things, because it showed the racing. There were interviews with drivers, but they kind of lacked that chemistry, I think, and that played a lot into it. And there was, because in Nitro RX, yes, there's more categories of racing over a weekend and all these kinds of things, but even in the gaps between the races, if they're not talking interviews, you go up to Kobe and Jared and they have a chat, or they go down and they have a look around the crowd with Street like Tommy. There's always something going on. Whereas on the World Rallycross, it just kind of finished. And then you have this collage of photos going through like you've stuck on a PowerPoint or something. And it didn't really go anywhere. And you just think it's kind of bad that, in the best possible way, that how Nitro is just really showing them up on how to do a show, and they really know what they're doing. And this is FIA World Rallycross. This is not something that is new. This is something they've got a lot of experience in, but they just seem to be losing it slightly. And Nitro, maybe I've just been spoiled too much, Nabila. Maybe it's just that, but I can really appreciate that more. And I think I'm definitely more of a Nitro person.
But I think that's the thing, like the FIA Championship, they're the FIA Championship. They don't have to have all of that fanciness with it. People are going to watch it. It's one of the most predominantly well-known championships. In their minds, yes. However, with Travis and with what Nitro's trying to do, they've never forgotten that their main focus is the spectator. At the end of the day, they're making this exciting for spectators. They want that crowd full of people excited about what's going on. They want the people outside watching it. They want this coverage to work. Do you know what I mean? They're putting in a lot of money. Like, they need it just to end up great. And I think that's great to see that Nitro is working on that, and they still haven't forgotten that the main thing for them is their spectator.
Definitely. And as well, you've seen both in the past and a little bit this season as well, drivers from the World Rallycross come in here for a round or two just to see what that's like. And you've got to think, sure, if you're doing all right in World Rallycross, but maybe you're not winning as much because you've got those top three always there, or some other reason there, you think, well, if I can have a bit more fun and if I can still win, which ultimately, if you're winning and if it's a championship or a race, it's still a championship or a race. It shouldn't really matter if it's FIA or not, if the scale of it is big enough. And I think this is where Nitro fits in really well, because you just kind of skip over that kind of necessary for it to be official in a way. So it really works, because then you can kind of say like, oh, how did you get into Extreme E, or how did you get into WRC? Oh, because I've got a Nitro win or a Nitro championship. Like, oh yeah, I know that. It's really cool. And then maybe it's in higher value because it's just available to so many more people so much easier. Whereas obviously World Rallycross, you still have to pay to watch it. But then going into drivers that impressed us the most over this weekend, for me, it's got to be Robin Larsson, just because mega weekend. And okay, yeah, he didn't win the final race, but up to that point, he was pretty much just dominating. He was the top qualifier on Saturday, and I don't know what porridge Travis had on Sunday, but I think Robin's going to want that for LA to make sure he can cover him off again. But I think that's also partly down to just getting high from the atmosphere at the circuit there that meant he was uncatchable. But Robin Larsson, brilliant weekend. Like we said earlier, he nearly died a few months ago, and you couldn't tell. You just couldn't tell. And again, it's like we were saying with some of the drivers that were crashing at the beginning of the weekend. You wouldn't notice if you'd missed that part and you just watched the final race on the Sunday. You're like, oh yeah, it's business as usual. You would have no inkling about it, and I think that's just what's so great about it. But what about you, Nabila? Who do you think was your standout driver for this round?
I definitely think Tommy Hallman impressed me a lot this weekend, like being able to come through and win a championship where there was so much uncertainty on how that championship was going to even work. And he just kind of took it in a stride, been like, no, I'm here to win. And he did it. Not once, not twice, but like 4 times. And that's super exciting. And then obviously it was really nice to see Travis come back in style and make it back to the top of the podium. He had a fun weekend. He enjoyed himself. He put himself into the atmosphere of Nitro and I think he fed off that crowd and thoroughly just enjoyed his whole weekend. And when you're in your home environment and you have that crowd cheering for you and around you and rooting for you, like they've come to see Travis, let's be real. The Americans.
It's a bit like Silverstone for Lewis, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it was really nice to see how all of that kind of fared out for him. And just nice to see him back on top, because I'm pretty sure at some point in a couple of, if you'd asked him about 2 months ago, he would have just been sat there going, I don't really know what's going on right now. I just expected, but I'm sure, as much as you say, he's a competitor, he's still competing, but this is his championship at the end of the day. And he's probably still really excited to see that there's so many different things happening at the same time. So hopefully, we'll continue to see all different winners. But yeah, they were definitely who stood out for me the most.
It's quite amusing as well that on a weekend where he lost $1,000 to a 13-year-old, he's still incredibly happy with himself. So it's quite amusing that. But the championship standings for Group B, we might as well run through them quickly as a kind of a final thought. Robin Larsson is out in first with 161 points to his name now, and he came into the weekend with, I think it was only a 1 or 2 point lead, but now it's 21 points, which is over second place Andreas Bakkerud with 140. Fraser McConnell in third with 114, and then Travis, despite the win, he did say on coverage that he was a little way back, and he's right, because he's only got 103 points. So that's going to be quite a gap for him to get. But as we were saying earlier, the season is very long, and if we're going to have different race winners, then maybe he'll just come second a lot, and that's how we'll get catch up to Larsson there. Oliver Ericsson in fifth with 87 points. Conor Martel didn't have a great final race there, kind of finished a bit down below, which wasn't too good, but 80 points for him. And then Oliver Bennett creeping up into seventh place with 65 points. 8th, 9th, and 10th are OC Baby, Nicholas Grunholm, and Chris Meek, which all of them couldn't really add to their tallies this weekend because none of them were there. So I think they're forgiven for not advancing too much. But again, 64, 60, and 55 points a piece for each of them. So not ridiculously far from the grand scheme of things. If they come back for an odd round here or there, they could still be fighting for fifth and sixth in the standing, essentially best of the rest. So that's not anything to shake a stick at, really, is it?
No, not really. But what's really cool to see is just Robin Larsson keeping that consistency going ahead and kind of being focused on. He doesn't necessarily have to win to still be in the lead of the championship by that much, you know what I mean? And we haven't seen Travis doing his all-route best. So there's still hope. I mean, there's another 7 rounds to go in this championship. Well, 6. I think it's 6. But
you're saying Travis
there is a lot still to come. I mean, he's still got time. There's nothing that's being categorized that's, oh my goodness, we've got to worry about what the future's going to hold in this championship. And Robin Larsson's running away from it with it. There's only been 3 rounds. There's still so much to come, and I'm not really sure how the point system works perfectly, but it looks like there's opportunities to be winning these points no matter what.
I'm going to say, if you can have such a big lead after only 3 races, and we've got quite a few more to come, then as you say, it can swing quite easily back. And I think from the last couple of years across all of the forms of motorsport that I certainly look at closely, there's 2 ways of winning a championship, which is either pure domination, your Oscar Piastri, your Dennis Hauger, your Max Verstappen this year, or you do it where it's just very consistent and quiet, your Will Powers, your Victor Martins, where somehow you only get 1 or 2 wins, but you seemed, and despite everyone else getting way more wins than you somehow still end up on top. And I think that might be Travis's secret weapon there. He's just going to slowly be there in the background. And then when there's an opportunity, he will pounce. And I don't think he's going to need much encouragement for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that brings us to the end of what was a very exciting round this week. Like, it was really nice to see the championship back in stateside, and it's staying here now because next we head over to LA, don't we?
End of the month. I'm looking forward to it so much already. I mean, Jenson as well, that would be a good place for him to get on the podium. It's basically his home base now, home away from home, if we still kind of claim him in the UK for that one. But I don't want to jinx it. I'm not going to say anything, but we both know what we'd love to happen there. And that's all I'm going to say on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just following up really on, you love the side-by-side action, and it's nice that Travis knows how to get it done still, because, you know, there's a slight question mark there. And then, yeah, I would love to see more of Jenson doing well. And with that, where can everyone find you?
Well, in the meantime, yes, I'm over on the Kerbs, which is, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's also on YouTube, so you're in the right place. Various interviews with motorsport people from across the world, and I'm also on the Undercut Podcast, which is an F1 podcast, and I write for Is It Fast? And Nabila, where can people find you in the meantime?
You can find me on Instagram and TikTok, and obviously over on our Nitro RX podcast page.
Excellent. So not long to go before LA. We may have an episode out between now and then if you're very, very lucky and you've been behaving well. So we'll see about that. And if not, we'll give you a definite review episode for LA, and we will see you then. Thank you very much for listening. Ta-ta for now.